This is an edited recording of a June 2021 webinar with Deb Vale and Alex Glade from Heartland AEA. Alex is an instructional tech and social studies consultant. Alex and Deb explore the ways that AEA Scout supports Iowa social studies standards that emphasizes the inquiry-driven model. Learning is organized around compelling questions. You'll learn about background information, source types, student research, primary sources, and how students can look at resources and build their own informed opinions. We hope you find some ideas from Deb and Alex that you can use in your classroom. Here is a link to the slides and additional resources.
When I asked Alex to join me, I said, Alex, what do you see? How can AEA Scout support social studies? And do you want to kind of fill us in on what that conversation sounded like?
Absolutely. So as I'm sure you all know, resources have always been an important part of social studies instruction, and that's become even more important with the adoption of Iowa's new social studies standards. As we now have the blending of disciplinary skills along with content knowledge in our standards. And this is promoting more of an inquiry-based classroom. And as we move more towards inquiry, we need students examining sources more. So as we thought about some of the different ways that we could explain ways that Scout could help this process of getting students examining sources and helping teachers locate sources for their students, we thought Scout would be great at helping to provide background information, at providing a variety of different source types that could be utilized within the classroom, and providing a way for students to research and learn a little bit more about the topics we're studying.
Great, great.
So
you want to go ahead?
Yep. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, so we've moved more towards an inquiry-driven model in social studies with the adoption of our new standards. And what this means is we're now organizing our learning around questions. So we're starting with compelling questions, these big unit level questions. These are the questions that don't have a right or a wrong answer. And you see a few examples here, things like, was the New Deal a good deal? So students could argue either point of view on this. And as teachers, we're not as worried about their specific answer as we are about the evidence they're using. So we want them to learn to pull evidence, to pull the knowledge that they're gaining throughout our unit, as well as pulling evidence from different resources to support whatever conclusion they come to.
Great, great.
And as we begin promoting these compelling questions and trying to get students to form their own conclusions, it's necessary for them to have some background information. Obviously, some of those questions, students might immediately come up with some sort of an answer, but those often are not the informed opinions that we want to teach them to have. So they do need some foundational knowledge upon which to build. And so we need some starting points for that. We need them to learn, back to the example we just mentioned of the New Deal. We need them to know a little bit about the Great Depression, about what the New Deal was, about Roosevelt's responses, and how all of this was a shift from previous policies. So they do need this baseline of knowledge. And once they have that, then they can start forming their own informed opinions.
Great. Yeah, that informed opinion, I think, is the critical piece.
Absolutely.
All right. So when you and I talked about this, you kind of suggested for this type unit, they'd need background information on the Great Depression, stock market crash, Dust Bowl, as well as political and policy issues with the previous president, as well as FDR. So these were some resources that I pulled from Scout on these 4 topics, just to give you an idea of what this might look like in that unit. All right, so then we went on to variety of sources. That was kind of our second bucket that you felt would be worthwhile for us to look at for Scout.
Absolutely. So as we've mentioned, resources are so important within social studies, but we do want different types of resources. It's important that we don't just have the same type every time. And by types of sources, this variety, this can mean a couple of different things. Part of this is including
Mhm.
primary and secondary sources. So those that are from the time period versus those that were created at a later point in time. So we do want to include those, some of each of those types,
Mhm.
but also variety of source mediums. So things like text-based sources or video or audio or images. And including these different types does reinforce some different skills for students. So they learn to analyze different types of sources. All of these are the types of sources they're going to run across for the rest of their lives. So we want them to know how to analyze these different types. And by looking at how similar content is represented in different sources, it can help students gain a deeper understanding of our topics and our unit of study. We also want to make sure that our variety of sources also includes a variety of perspectives so that students are looking at things from different angles, from how it affected different people in different ways. And these different perspectives not only give them a clearer picture of what's going on, but it also helps them, again, form their own conclusions to that big, compelling question. We need to examine different sides of an issue before we can form our own informed opinions. And by including all of this variety of source types, primary and secondary, um, and different perspectives, all of this also helps maintain student interest. So they don't get bored by looking at the same types of things over and over. Just this variety just helps keep them a little bit more engaged in our topics.
Yep. You make a really good point about student interest. I also think that I'm not an auditory learner. I need to see it.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to be better in a visual format than auditory. And I think when we give students opportunities to engage with different formats, we're more apt to hit everybody's sweet spot.
Absolutely.
All right. So, in terms of a variety of sources, again, this was on the New Deal unit. Okay. And I was able to find a streaming audio source on the Great Depression. I found a video on the New Deal. I found a newspaper article about the Dust Bowl. I also found an article, just a contemporary article on the Dust Bowl. As well as some images. The Dust Bowl was such a compelling time period visually that I think it really hits home to pull those images in when you try to explain the Dust Bowl. So again, as Alex said before, it's important to pull in all of those sources, especially depending on the topic. An image might be better than an audio or whatever. So again, take advantage of Scout's format choices. And I wanted to show you how you're going to find those format options. I went ahead and put my search in and I choose advanced search. And then on the right sidebar, you get some filters that you can apply. You're going to scroll down till you find the format section. And then here you can choose what format you want. And Alex, you and I were talking about primary sources. This format section might be make it easier for you to find those primary sources. Do you want to talk for a second about that?
You bet, absolutely. So we know that primary sources are an important part of social studies instruction, but sometimes they're pretty hard to find. So as Deb mentioned, this advanced search and the format option here is a great way to narrow down your search a little bit. Now you'll notice there's not necessarily a primary source format category, but a number of these could include primary sources, especially things like the newspaper format. Those are going to be primary sources. Many of the government format uh, file types are going to be primary sources, as well as a lot of the images and some of the documents. So these are some great ways to narrow it down. And as we said, they won't necessarily have everyone in that category be primary sources, but that's going to give you a lot of primary sources by narrowing down your formats.
Great. Thank you for adding that. One of the things so far that we have been talking about teachers finding resources for students to learn with. But I also think it's important for teachers to remember that AEA Scout isn't just a great tool for students. It's also a great resource for teachers to learn. Let's say we've got somebody new to social studies or new to teaching or just new to incorporating primary sources into their instruction, and it's something that they want to either learn or get better at. So it's a great tool to be able to, I did a quick search on primary source and quickly did a search. These were the top 4 hits. And what it brought up was not specific primary sources, but kind of pedagogy type articles that would help me understand how to frame a primary source. How do I get kids to interact with it? That kind of thing. So do keep in mind that Scout is a great resource for educators to kind of hone their pedagogy as well. Alex, you want to kind of launch this third bucket that we've been talking about?
Yeah, so far, a lot of what we've talked about are resources gathered by the teacher that then are given to the students. And that's an important way for students to begin analyzing sources and for us as teachers to make sure that they're getting some of the content out of these specific sources. So we're sure they're getting the content we want them to get. But additionally, it's also important that they understand how to do some research on their own.
Mm-hmm.
As we know, a lot of what we want to do in social studies and really in school in general is to prepare students for the rest of their lives. And as adults, when we want to know more about a topic, we rarely have someone just handing us the information about it. We have to go find that information on our own. And Scout provides a great way for students to begin practicing these skills of research and finding information on their own within a controlled environment. Because we know that the materials in Scout are all good, high quality materials. So they are finding some good things, but they're practicing those skills of how to dig a little deeper. And by doing this, they're finding that specific evidence that they can use to support their conclusion to that big, compelling question we talked about back at the beginning. Additionally, it could also just be that they're digging a little deeper into a topic that they're interested in. So Scout provides a great way for students to begin just gathering a little more information on their own rather than us just handing them the sources they need.
Great. One of the things I really wanted to make a point of is to share the tools that are embedded within Scout. There's some really great tools available. Essentially, I've got a screenshot on the right side of this slide, and essentially it's an article, and I clicked and dragged through a portion of the text, and then I get this pop-up menu. And I really like the note-taking feature. As a teacher, I can hold a student accountable for their thinking as they are reading this article to process and kind of think critically about the content. For English learners, this is a really great option. They can have any portion of the text translated into, I think there are 80 or 90 different languages. And some of those languages can also be read aloud. So it'll translate it, then you can have it read aloud. This option right here is read aloud. You've got struggling students or somebody that just wants to listen to it. They have the option to click and drag through the text and it will be read aloud to them. And frankly, I'm kind of impressed with the read aloud. A lot of those sound very digitized. This is still an automated computerized reading, but it sounds very much like real human reading. You also have the dictionary. In content areas. There may very well be new vocabulary words that they need some support with. So that dictionary is a nice option. This, if I were to click Cite, I could choose the format, APA, Chicago, MLA, and choose the format I want. It would generate the citation for me. I can copy and paste it into my bibliography. So again, kind of nice to have that. I can also copy this article and interact with that copy. I also can highlight. I know when I had students researching, I would have them click and drag through portions of the text so they could sort, oh, this is a fact about their early life, or this is a fact. So you can use that color code highlighting to kind of organize your thoughts. One important note here is that if you notice you don't have the full set of tools when you click and drag through the text, more than likely that's because this resource has not been saved into a folder. So it's important, if you want the full set of tools, make sure that you save that resource into a folder. I told you about that note-taking option. That was one of the tools. And it's not just a student tool. It can also be used as the teacher. I can add some guiding questions inside a resource. So here's the summary of that resource. Here's the resource opened up. And as you can tell, it's a video. And right here on the right-hand margin is my note. I've got a guiding question that I want them to think about while they read that. And I think that's especially important with videos. Kids just tend to watch them and not necessarily dig in deeply unless they're prompted. So when I share this resource, that question follows the resource, and it's right there when they watch that video. This next screen will show you how to go about setting that up. It's only when you share a resource. So up at the top here, it says what the item is I'm going to share. I choose the individual or group that I would like to share it with. And to make sure that my notes go through those guiding questions that I want to set up for students, I click this box and then share. So when that resource goes over to their Scout account, the resource will be there as well as my guiding questions, which is kind of slick. You also have the option to download, save, and print resources that are in Scout. This first, it looks like a download symbol, will enable you to download it to your computer. And then you can add things to it. You can put your assignment in there, do whatever you need to. This option pulls up pushing it out to Google Drive, Google Classroom, or Microsoft OneDrive. So you can easily embed that in what you're currently using. And the third option up here is to print, okay? Also wanted to make sure that you know, so many of us have an LMS that even if we're face-to-face, we may have an LMS where we put resources. And there are two places where you can find the persistent link, which is the link that students would use to access the resource. This is on the summary page. So I opened up a resource, or I didn't actually get to the resource itself. The step before is the summary page. And right here is the persistent link. And when I click on this, it copies it to the clipboard. This is also another place I can find it. Here's the resource itself. And up at the top right is that link icon. And again, it will enable me to copy. It just automatically copies it to your clipboard. An important point to note is, if your student is in, let's say, Canvas or Google Classroom, and they click on that link, if they are not logged into Scout, it'll drop them at the login page. It will not continue and take them all the way into the resource. So my recommendation is just get kids used to logging into Scout first, and then click on the link and it will go directly into that resource. So two ways, as I said, to get that persistent link on the summary page, as well as in the article itself. Okay, so one of the things we felt strongly about was to provide some support videos. What's the best way to take notes? How do I share things? We've got very, very quick, easy screencast videos that will walk you through the process. All of the videos are 3 minutes or less, and they are all accessible within Scout. If you go up to your profile, top right, and you click on the little eye, you'll be able to access all of these videos right there. Anyway, so quick and easy way, and feel free to share this with your students, show them it's there, and make sure it's available. All right, an important note right here. First time that students get into Scout, they will be asked for a verification code. And this link right here will take you to the people that are responsible for training in Scout. So it has all the contact information there. Alex, you want to handle this next slide?
You bet. So as you've watched this video, hopefully you've gained some new knowledge about Scout, and even as you play around with Scout on your own, hopefully you're figuring out some new things and gaining some ideas of how you can utilize Scout within your classroom. However, learning on our own is one thing, but by collaborating with the other educators, we can come up with some different ideas. We can work together and come up with a lot of other ideas for ways to utilize Scout. So we thought that by helping to provide some possible discussion questions related to Scout, that maybe you could use these in your PLCs and help generate some discussion and brainstorm and collaborate as a group to come up with some ways that Scout could benefit both you as teachers as well as the students in your classrooms.
Great, great. All right. Well, hopefully you have a vision for maybe how Scout can support the content you teach, or if you're an instructional coach, the teachers that you work with. Keep these resources in mind. As you move forward and you want additional support with Scout or social studies, right here on this slide, I've put a link. It's to that very same contact information. It has who you need to talk to if you want Scout support in each one of the AEAs. I believe it provides a phone number as well as email. Sorry, my clock chimes on the hour. Anyway, so you've got that information there if you need to reach out to a Scout consultant. Also, check with your AEA to find out who your social studies consultant is, or Alex has very graciously offered to field your questions and push them out to the appropriate person in your AEA if you're not sure or you're not in the Heartland area. So anyway, we are hoping that with support, we can help you to find how to use AEA Scout. Alex, I want to thank you so very much for joining me for this conversation. Your depth of knowledge in social studies really has been very, very helpful. So again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. I'm happy to help. And as Deb said, feel free to reach out to me if there's anything I can do to help anyone.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.